Connected Business is the beautiful title of today's whole half-day event. And I guess Tracy specifically asked me to talk about how social media related to your business. How can you get more out of it for your business? And unlike most presentations, I'm actually going to start my presentations by saying, please leave your phones on and use the hashtag if you are on social media already, and tweet away. So, for the start of my journey, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit, back to the mid-90s. That's where I started my working life. And in starting that working life, one of the key things that was said to me about my use of technology at the time is, email, how's it relevant to us? Linda, if you want to have an external email address, you're going to have to be appropriately authorized by the company. One of the senior partners in the department said that he was never, ever going to use email. It was completely irrelevant to how he spoke with his clients and his contacts. Now, I'm looking around the room, I can see people smiling as I talk about that. It's actually not that long ago. And of course, many of those things that were said back then about email, of course, now being said about social media for business. Now, having not had a bit of a break between the two sessions, I'm going to do a quick canvas around the room to get a feel of where social media use is in the room. So may I ask you all to stand up, please, and stretch your legs. Sorry, with your laptop there. So, to begin with, if you are already very active in social media for your business, very active using it, could you please sit back down? No, it's a good majority of the room. So for everybody else that's still standing up, late sitting down, somewhere in between about your activity levels. So for everybody else in the room, take a look around the room and look at the people sitting down. You know, if they're people you know, make sure to ask them about how they're using it after this session. If they're people you haven't met, make sure to network with them later on. And obviously, they would be great people in this room to start a conversation with later when you do use it more actively. For the next question, it's people that aren't yet on social media actively, but get the business benefits, just curious to find out a little bit more. Could you please sit down? Ah, okay. Gentleman at the back, you're the last person standing. That's very unusual that would be the case. So I guess my question for you is, what would you want to find out particularly from today, and what's your hesitation about joining that conversation for business?
A few views, but the first point is that I don't see the relevance to my business because it's very specific. What I've seen today is that social media is mainly retail orientated, IT orientated. We're very much a bricks and mortar type of business.
Okay.
So I don't see that. So the reason I'm here is to see which of this social media is useful.
Right. So for the rest,
sorry. A bit of a dinosaur, really, but because of the rise in social media, I think humans are going to lose the power of speech.
Good. Thank you for your comments. I've got a little present for you here. Typically at the back of the room, so a little bit of a walk. So there's a little booklet with some of the tips that I'm going to talk through today. Now, as there was only one person standing, is there anyone else that would like one of my little booklets here? It's the Brilliance at the Basics of social media. People fight over these at certain events. But I need a little contribution as to why, what would you like out of this event? Do you have any hesitations? Do you have any fears?
So I just started as a new virtual assistant, and I'm going to be supporting the creatives to create. So all the guys that do websites and digital businesses don't want to do all the backroom stuff like answering phones, phone management, all that boring stuff. Come to me, I can do it for you. You have no overhead to pay, and you can have no what you want. Which is something that I'm developing, and then developing September, and I'm hoping my friends can, and of course I'm building this online. So,
okay, thank you for that contribution. So we've had a point about relevance there, we've pointed about how can we be more efficient about using it to grow our business there. Any other comments that I should pick up before I start? Everyone's scared now to ask one of you. One more comment here. Yeah.
I'm very good to get social media when you've got something to say that's
I struggle is when you have, I guess, your newsletters are always on physical, but expecting to see interesting newsletters.
Okay.
A little bit worried about what is the right thing to do in that circumstance.
So quality versus quantity, timing of information. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
And a little bit more about Twitter as well, because I get hands on Facebook, but I find it very hard to install a hashtag.
So joining the conversation, how to join up the conversations between social platforms. Thank you. Okay, one last one. Your comment first. Hold on to them. Okay. So when Facebook guys were talking, oops, sorry, it's quite stretched. There you go. So getting the balance between quality, content, and engagement going out. Okay. Thank you very much for your contributions there. Get back. I don't have a little clicker, so I can't just switch it over. So I guess that it's having, first of all, that email analogy in mind as a starting point, and thinking about the relevance to us as business and the way that we might communicate. And I mentioned earlier in the panel, it's ultimately, at its heart, all businesses, retail, B2B, whatever type of business, it is about relationships. That's at the crux of every type of business. And ultimately, if businesses are based on relationships, and relationships are based on conversations, how can you use the online world to make sure that you can accelerate through how you build those relationships? And something that we've noticed in building our business is how using social media can accelerate you through that buying cycle. How can you get to meet relevant contacts? How can you get to build relationships? What can you know about them to get them to the point of them liking you, which then gets them to those next levels of business? So how can you change, I guess one of the key things social media does, I mentioned earlier about the fear in the panel discussion, and how people can be very scared about getting onto social media. So the one gentleman that was standing at the end, I would have been stood up with you before my startup. I was very much in my corporate life, I'd spoken to the press quite a lot, got quoted quite a lot, and what that really meant for me in the business world was I spoke to corporate communications and they handled it. The sense of being personable, to be human, was actually quite alien and terrifying to me when I first joined social media. And so very much as a cynic to convert, what I realized is one of the key things that did change. If I took that fear element out, if I started to think about it the other way around and think about how I could find relevant conversations, I could find relevant contacts, what it was allowing me to do to actually be more, the question earlier about time, how could I spend and focus my time more in a more targeted way? And social media would allow me to do that. It actually enabled me to reach a much broader audience, but in a much more targeted way. And so as opposed to the much more traditional marketing rules, which are about how many people you've got to reach to get to the right conversion levels, what is your conversion rate by using these particular channels, that was the one thing I noticed that social media could switch on its head, that you could stand in the middle and let everybody come to you. So how did I start my own social media journey? So this individual plays a huge role in my education, and because I was very new to social media as I started up my business, and during our research phase, he was very vocal about how he was using Twitter. And so I thought I'd go and he was very much saying he was doing it. So I was very curious as to why he would, why is it relevant, and what was he doing? Now, very much with a business-minded focus, what I was very surprised to realize is, actually, what was he doing? It was amazing for business. So it was an open secret, that first one, customer engagement. It was an open secret that he filmed Friday Night with Jonathan Ross on a Thursday. So, of course, what he would start doing was on a Wednesday start tweeting about who he was meeting the next day, how excited he was, who that person was like a hero to him, how much he cared about them. And of course, if you start thinking about it, what is he doing? He's creating buzz for his product. His product is the show, the features are his guests, and he's giving those feature details out ahead of the event so that other people could join in with that engagement, that excitement. On Thursday, he would then, as filming happened, he would share insights from within the studios. He would send tweet pics show you who he was meeting and how happy he was, informal insights about his business. And so that level of engagement with his client, ultimately, what is he doing? So he's talked about his features, he's created buzz about his product. What is he doing that for? To increase sales, in his case, audience ratings. So that's the first point. What surprised me then, having realized that business element of what he was doing, was how quickly he switched from talking about the Friday night program to, as soon as it was aired, he would talk about his Radio 2 show. And how he would tweet out requests. So he'd say, tomorrow I'm going to do 80s, tell me your favorite track. Tomorrow I'm going to do first albums, tell me which was the one you bought first. Two things really appealed to me as a business person. One, customer research, how efficient was he being? It could have taken him a couple of hours before to pull up a playlist, sit down, think about what he was going to play, and instead I could see the stream filling up in seconds. So his work was done, he could go home early, and he could forget about what he was pulling together. More importantly than that, though, that customer research obviously means that he knows, as he sells his product, that it's going to be much more on topic. It's much more exactly what his clients want. They're excited to wait for this product to come out. They're excited to know that they will have had a stake in how they have developed that product. And of course, ultimately, they're all waiting to see if they get mentioned, which is the key thing. Number three, in terms of in all businesses, brilliant businesses will always make their clients feel special. And so he was even meeting that final element of it within his Twitter stream. How was he doing that? So those Radio 2 listeners were waiting to hear if they'd been picked. In the Comedy Awards, what he was doing was he was tweeting out saying, I want a 140-character soundbite that I've got to say during my presentation as I host the awards that no one else is going to understand if they don't understand, if they're not on Twitter. And even, it doesn't matter, it doesn't fit into the context, I will still say it. So, of course, what he was actually doing in business language, he was running a competition. Loads of people were getting involved, talking about him, talking about what was going on, creating these sound bites for him to share. And from that, of course, then the element of, even if you weren't the one, so the one that got picked gets the kudos of being the soundbite that's going to be mentioned. But even if you weren't picked, you were in on a special inside joke that nobody else would understand. So that ability to make your clients feel special was what was capable through this medium. And so from lurking and learning and watching Jonathan Ross and what he was doing, I decided to join the Twitter conversation. And what was quite surprising to me was in my kind of first proper play of it, it resulted in what was written up in some marketing manuals, marketing publications as a Twitter ambush, a marketing ambush. Now, I had no idea I was doing that, so it was also tagged with being an accidental ambush. Now, what happened was that, okay, I thought, right now, I've seen how it works, I'm going to start tweeting. And there was a particular conference going on, so I thought I'd mention that I was going. This is before we had a product, before we had really a business. We were still in the research phase, and my bio literally just said, I've left the corporate world, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing next. What was fascinating to me, as soon as I shared this insight that I was going to this conference, and one of the key reasons I was going is I wanted to meet up with one of the keynote speakers that I had just started really conversing with more on social media. What was fascinating to me, as soon as I said I was going, some mutual followers started to say, well, I'm going too. Can we meet up at this conference? And so immediately you get the thing of you're getting coffees booked in, you're getting meetings booked in. I haven't got a business yet, but I'm already moving through my know, like, and trust. I'm moving to another level of what's going on at this conference. The next level that happened was beyond, so for my travel time, so when people talk about return on social media, for my travel time, I've already increased my return of going to this event and pitching up there. The second thing that happened was that people that couldn't make it started to advocate me. So they started to say, I can't make this conference, but Linda's going to go. So keep an eye out for her and her tweets and what she's going to say from it. And of course, my following number increased. So that was one of the questions earlier. How can you get that broader engagement to happen? So that was great, and it was finding more relevant people that are interested in what I might be doing. The third element that came through was that, of course, then I felt obliged to tweet from the event. I've almost been announced that I'm going. So in being announced, I thought, right, I'm going to send as many insights as I can. If people are saying some good things that other people will be interested in, I'll make sure to share that. Now, there was a keynote panel, and actually they've been headline act, full of amazing people, and so I was very much looking forward to what insights I would gain from them, having announced it, what was quite disappointing is they weren't a very good panel. So then I was having to think, well, I've announced that I'm listening to this panel, and I said something cheeky, but not rude about any of the panelists, saying they haven't quite given me the insight I want. The fascinating thing for me was when I was talking about how it can invert conversations. People that were at that conference started to tweet at me, and people outside of the room also started to tweet at me saying, you really must meet James. He really knows what he's talking about. You really must meet Susan. She's a huge expert in this area. Now, these were people I hadn't known of before this, I hadn't heard of before this. And what was quite fascinating to me, so these are being seen as experts, people, influential individuals, other people want to connect with. People outside of the room, none of which at that point I had met with in real life, had validated me and introduced me to these influencers. And then what was weird was the influencers came to find me. And it was a huge realization for me about how I could be vouched, I could be given credibility by people that weren't even in the room. And they could introduce me to people that would be really potentially very important, very helpful to my business, that I hadn't even been aware of before that point. So that was the first switch. And I talked about how it led to an ambush. So taking that event, I then thought about a different one and started thinking, okay, how can I apply that to other areas of what I'm doing? And so there was a conference, and where this keynote was coming down from Scotland, and I had been tweeting with him more, and so I wanted to meet up with him. And this connection of sending a message out, what fascinated me was, we did have a lot of mutual followers. They decided that they wanted to come along and meet us too. I wasn't going to the conference itself, I was just meeting up with this speaker. And what happened in that growth, and you'll any SMEs in here in terms of tight budgets, I couldn't afford to go to that conference, the second one. The first one was free, the second one was not. And so I had phoned the conference organisers saying, can I come along, just listen to a couple of sessions, next year when I've got some money, maybe I'll be paying you, and I'd like some insight into your conference first. They were very rude, actually, and said, not at all, if you've got no money, you can stay clear. And this keynote speaker that was flying down from Scotland, as I say, had built a relationship with him, wanted to meet with him. So having had this rude rejection, I still said, could we meet up for a drink after the event, after your speaking? He was immediate, yes, great opportunity. Now, with our mutual followers, what was fascinating, as soon as we had said yes and confirmed that we were meeting up that evening, everybody asked if they could come too. We had a load of people responding, saying, oh, if you two are meeting up, can we come? And it was through the hashtags, the lady up there mentioned about how hashtags I think of as color-coded name badges, really. They're labels for you to find things on that topic. As soon as you click on a hashtag, it takes you through to all other conversation on it. So suddenly a hashtag was being created for the fact that Brian and I were meeting for a drink. And it grew and grew and grew to the end that we had over 80 RSVPs. And the fact that those slightly rude conference organisers had to phone me back and ask me if I was willing to send some of our attendees to their event, and whether there was anything they could work with us on, and hence the accidental Twitter ambush. So it's thinking about those conversations of relevance to you, and thinking about how you can get them to centre around your topics of interest. And in my opening of saying, leave your phones on, having now understood that this is how this level of communication could happen, I now do go to all conferences and I make sure to tweet away from them, sharing insights. And it's interesting that what conversations come back from outside the room. If people aren't there with me, what things they find interesting in my network. And what was fascinating is I went to a very traditional event, and the IOD won't mind me mentioning this because they've changed how they've done it since. So I went to an IOD event, and of course the first thing they said was, please switch your phones off. Now, I was actually very frustrated about that, but I felt that it would be impolite. It was a very direct instruction. It was a workshop scenario, so I did. The thing that frustrated me in this case was actually the event I attended was about communication and how you get your messaging out. So the first thing I thought is, you've just stopped me from doing exactly what you're talking about. So that was the very first thing. The second thing is, because now I have created a community that is interested in the things I go to and the topics that I talk about, they had been saying, oh, I'm really interested in that speaker. I haven't had a chance to go, or I can't make that meeting today. I'd love to hear what you think. So what had happened is then they were waiting for insights that I could not share then until I got on the train to go home. And to me, this sense of etiquette about it, what is the etiquette about using social media? It looks rude that I'm tapping into my phone. It looks like I'm disinterested, perhaps. But actually, I challenge anyone that if someone is actively tweeting, and we have our official tweeter for the event here over there, they're having to listen a lot more intently to be able to take those notes. So actually, when you're looking at someone and it looks like they're playing with their phone, they might be the person in the room that's the most actively listening to what's going on. Beyond that, in terms of an efficiency sense, it's my way of note-taking. It's automatically captured in technology, it's sorted. I don't need to then go and convert my notes, my nicely handwritten notes, into something else. I'm sharing it there and then, and I also get the sense of what elements of what's going on resonates the most with the outside world, that sense of feedback. And so I did then get on the train and tweet about this speaker, and it did lead to him getting 3 other speaking engagements. So it's that sense of, if we start switching our mindset about what it means to us in business terms, what it means to us from an etiquette perspective, and how that can impact our business, that's the change that social media can bring in. So some key actions and takeaways for you guys. So assuming, and hopefully, that I've convinced you that social is important for your business. Some key things to take away. The first one is think about this LinkedIn as your shop front. It's vital for us all now from a personal perspective, business perspective, because if someone meets you at an event like this, the first thing, if they haven't got your card, or even if they have, they'll Google your name, maybe with your company, and the most optimized thing that's going to come up, unless you're famous, infamous, in which case Wiki might beat it, will be LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the first impression you get to make in your own words for your business. So in doing that, make sure that your shop front looks good. Make sure you review your shop front. Make sure you freshen up your shop front every so often. And make it really easy for people to join the dots. So if this is your shop front, your address now is your URL. And all of us now in this room are very much defined by our URLs, how people find you, what are the profiles that come up against you. So that's your address. So make sure you have a good address. Make sure it's a very simple thing to do in LinkedIn, but if you don't do it, LinkedIn give you a load of numbers and letters at the end of your name. It's go and claim your name. Makes you more optimized, makes it easier for people to find you. And then make it easy for people to join the dots. They've walked through your shop front, they want to have more, or you're still encouraging them to walk through your shop front. Make it easy for people to find out more about you, to hear your tone of voice, to go to your blog and find out what you're talking about, to go to your Twitter and hear how you might sound in conversation. Encourage them to want to know, like, and trust you. Get them to walk through that shop front. Then in saying that your addresses, your URLs have become what people will find about you, know that social media is this amazing wealth of research. All businesses, if you're going into meetings, people talk about the worst thing is to go into any meeting cold or to make a cold call, how horrible that is and how that will drop down your to-do list if you've got to actually go and do some cold calling. There is no need for any call to be cold. It's how you can know information about those contacts before you join a conversation. And so in terms of finding information about people, so here, this is my business partner, Mark. If I've got his Quora profile, which is an expertise system, I know what he thinks he's an expert in, and of course what I can do from a business perspective is flatter him on those topics. If I can see his blog, people in personal blogs will always talk about what's annoyed them recently or what's really impressed them recently. You know that person's loves and hates. Immediately that's a much more insightful and easier way to engage with somebody. So get that research done, make those conversations more beneficial so that you feel that you can start that conversation in a more concentrated way. But of course, the flip of it is remembering that people can research you in exactly the same way. Make sure all your profiles are up to date. Know that people will be looking. And when they're looking, that's going to be the first impression you're able to give. And so when they are looking, make sure that your profiles encourage them to want to talk to you. So I mentioned LinkedIn is the shop front. So Twitter is your cocktail party, and the Facebook people, Facebook I would define as the house party. So the difference in that is that in the cocktail party, Twitter's etiquette that has formed from the fact that who you follow and who follows you are not connected means that it's created this etiquette where you can join any conversation uninvited as long as your conversation is of interest and on topic, and hopefully you're amusing or interesting and insightful to people. So in that way that here, you can walk up to anybody and start a conversation. You're here because of Connected Business. You're here because you're interested in the same topics. You can start a conversation with anybody in this room, whether or not you've ever met them or been introduced to them. Twitter allows you to do the same. And the power of that for business is huge. The fact that you can join any conversation. And more importantly, taking that analogy further, so 2 key things I would say is don't delegate. People often talk about how, I'll get the grad to do social media, they'll get it. And the thing is, if that grad you would send to represent your company in real life, that's great. If you would not, why are you putting them on the virtual equivalent that has much greater reach? So that would be my question about delegation of social media to junior members of staff. And then finally, in terms of that cocktail party analogy, if you're new to Twitter, think about your bio in the way of thinking about how would you love to be introduced by somebody else at a cocktail party. The perfect cocktail party introduction should be in that bio so the conversation can naturally flow. And that way, that's what you're doing. You're enabling that introduction to exist so that people can start talking to you. And then my final one, which has actually been mentioned lots today, thank you, Herb, for doing slide 5 for me. Just making sure that you find out where people talk. Go and do that social discovery. Go and find out where your contacts talk themselves, where they're spending time. You want to be speaking where people want to listen to you. So as a software startup, it was interesting. A lot of people, when there was a lot of hype about Google+, were saying, why aren't you on it? We could categorically say it's not key. Most of our clients and contacts aren't using it. It's not to say we won't get to it, but in terms of business prioritization, it's not vital to what we do right now. So make sure you know where they hang out, speak where people want to listen to you. In terms of case study, I guess us as a startup, we very much, the Microsoft expression is eating your own dog food. So of course, as a startup, we thought about how important social media is and how to join that conversation, and of course use our own product as well in doing that. And this has been our return so far. We're less than 18 months old startup. We ended last year being named a top 20 startup in the UK. We started this year as one of 25 companies that reflect the future. And it's been using social media throughout that journey. We've had people that have been talking about our beta product and giving us feedback. We've been very public about whether people like something or don't like something. Some of the initial bloggers that wrote about us, they've created some of the web copy that we're still using today. So we had them in terms of how you're engaging that audience from the beginning, you're letting them get involved in your product development so you know that you're developing something that people care about and want to use. And then beyond that, it's the ability for them to drive your business forward. What are the elements that people see as most central? And I was speaking to a mentor of mine who, he's a retired chairman of a global brand that you guys would certainly recognize. And he was saying how difficult it was when he was heading up that business to get feedback. I mean, Herb mentioned his survey of half an hour minimum for how many pages. And my mentor was mentioning to me how painful it would be. Do you phone people at home? Do you send them a survey? Do you interrupt them in time they don't want to be interrupted in? And he said, how I would have loved to be able to get this kind of feedback and response from our clients. And it's so instantaneous, and people will send you it because it doesn't take them much time. So it's how it can play a part, not only in growing your brand in terms of your marketing, but all those other elements as well in terms of research, engagement, product development. Don't forget those elements. And then actually I'd say just in terms of branding for us, I mean, the first time I got a BBC appearance, it was a 45-minute section on a radio program. One other thing I'd add about social media is embrace the serendipity. That opportunity simply came about because a journalist tweeted that she was passing through where we're based and saying, oh, it looks very grim out there. Why would anyone ever stop in that town? And from that tweet conversation, it led to an article which then led to this appearance on the BBC. So also embrace the serendipity of the information that's out there. So social media, one of the key things I would say about the next stage of business, how it incorporates into our business, is the fact that it will become vital to our next generation of how we look at client relationship management, how we talk to our customers, our contacts, our suppliers. How do you manage all of those strands and relationships? And that's the end of my presentation. So the key thing I would say is remember the starting analogy about email. Remember that social media is simply just another way to talk. And make sure that if people are already talking on there, that you join those conversations. Enjoy all the different types of parties. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So Tracy is saying that we've got 5 minutes for questions if people have any questions. Stunned silence. Nothing at all? Oh, one here. Hello. Is it Janet? Oh, Janet was tweeting at me yesterday. Yes.
Hi, Linda. I just wanted to ask you, obviously there's a major platform like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Which is your favourite tool to use to help you to use the particular platform the easiest that you can? Obviously, as the gentleman asked earlier, times of the essence of small traders, and use of tools that would help us with the platforms. Which ones do you find it useful?
I mean, for us, we're very focused on the B2B world, so it has been Twitter, because the cocktail party is the most relevant to us and our contacts. And so to this point, it has been. I've had a good chat with the Facebook guys over the last day or two, and they're obviously having a different view on it. And I think that's one of the things they've changed recently to try and answer that in Facebook is this subscribe functionality. Because up until this point, Twitter has been the only platform, until they added that subscribe, that where those things weren't connected. You know, who you followed, who followed you were not connected. In Facebook, you had to be friends. In LinkedIn, you had to be linked with one another. In Google+, you're in the same circle. So there was no ability to turn off the noise, the people that you don't necessarily want to listen to. Whereas because Twitter had this very clearly from the start, it did form this etiquette where it's great, you can join the conversation, but I might not follow you and have you in my timeline, but that's okay. And so that's why it was key to us, and I guess that's why this cocktail party analogy I use has been vital to our business. But I think it's one of the things that is constantly evolving. So my tip is to find out, find out where your contacts spend their time. And then from there, focus on one or two of those platforms that feature the most. Keep an eye on which ones they're moving on to, because it will evolve, and who knows which will be the platform in the end, because they keep changing. Oh, Herb. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go to the lady behind you first, Herb.
Yes. Pinterest, what's your kind of thoughts on that and where it might go?
Yeah, it's very early for Pinterest, really. Obviously, it's had a massive amount of interest. What's interesting to see is that of course, it's visual. So businesses that are very visual, it's a great thing for. So designers, interiors, weddings, those have been the key kind of businesses that have first jumped on board for that visual element. And so I'm curious to see how that does grow. And I think if you are in businesses that adds that dimension to give your contacts a greater insight into how it looks, I think it has great value. But it will be interesting to see how, who sticks with it. There's been the comment so far, it has been more women because it's been more visual in that kind of way, and how they like to pin up those ideas for them, how they're storyboarding.
Lots of mums pinning kind of recipes of holidays and things like that, and I'm just wondering if it might kind of progress to be more useful as a business tool. I'm not really sure what it will.
Yeah, so I'm not certain. I kind of feel like those more visual businesses, there is more opportunity, but it hasn't become standard as yet. Herb, sorry, your question.
You had cloud as one of your
yes.
You guys measure, I suppose. And so there's two questions really. One is that do you find that a platform that you guys are actually doing an interaction? And secondly, what's your take on just this whole social capital area, which you might want to talk about?
Yes. So if people aren't aware of, so Clout, notice Clout was one of the sort of top 10 for us. So Clout is a measure of your social influence. And of course, whenever there's a measure, I come from an economics background, lies, damn lies and statistics. Whenever there's a measure, there's people that will seek to influence that measure, to manipulate that measure. So it's kind of been born out of the fact of initially people saying that I'm really important because I've got 10,000 followers, be that in Facebook or likes in Facebook or followers in Twitter. And of course, quite often what was happening is you had 10,000 followers because you'd follow 10,000 people, and people were getting fed up about how, you're not really important, are you? So I guess these social measurement tools are formed. So Peer Index is one, Clout is one. And they were trying to show more, and their analytics and algorithms are based on trying to work out how much resonance your message has. Who's responding when you talk on social platforms, who's engaging with you, who's retweeting, and what is the clout or whatever the measure is of the other individuals that are getting back to you. So some of the highest clout scores, BBC Breaking News, has a very high clout score. It's in the 80s. I think it's out of 100, but I've never seen anyone hit that mark. There's been some write-ups about Justin Bieber getting close, but I'm not sure about that. And so what it was trying to do was give a better sense of that. But what's been interesting to see in our industry then is to see how people have then sought to influence that. So the first thing is people were mass following to hope people might mass follow them back. They were then mass unfollowing so that they then had a better ratio, was the next step. Then what I found out, the first time I realized it was based on an individual I did know face to face who had thousands upon thousands of followers, and he was following like 50 people. And he was really dull. And I really could not understand why this ratio existed for him until I found out then, of course, that businesses had been born that sold followers. So, but of course, exactly, why would you do that? So can social influence be bought was my next question about that. And what was interesting to see is, and he has admitted, he got caught into a very difficult situation of constantly having to buy followers. Because if you buy several thousand and then most of them think you're dull, they're going to unfollow you. So if you want to keep your measure up, you've got to go and buy another tranche of followers to keep that ratio in proportion. And then Clout came in and tried to do away with that entirely. But what I guess we've seen instead is you'll get people that create 50 profiles and then retweet and engage one central one from the other 49 to try and manipulate that as well. So again, Clout's tried to step in to take those kind of elements out. So I take it with a pinch of salt. I think the sense is if your clients and contacts are on those platforms, it's being aware that they are and have a sense of what it is. So you have to have a reasonable clout, have a clout score and have an okay one, but I wouldn't bother to try and manipulate it.
Does anyone take it seriously?
I've certainly heard of certain organisations that say I won't follow anyone back if they don't have a clout of this and above. So I guess there's that kind of balance. But I think it's more really, it's about that engagement. Should we start engaging with a potential contact that has a clout of 5, tweets either 0 a day or 500 a day, and follows 10,000 people and is followed back by 3? What do these ratios? They give us an idea of whether that person's going to be a good person to chat to or not. But I don't think it's all or nothing. It's not the key final decision.
You heard anything regarding the new changes by Google, the Google Panda for website optimization in terms of respect to the changes to there are a lot of things. It's been proven now that adding a Google Plus account will lead you back up to the Google front page. It's equivalent to 5,000 tweets. So that's a school
Okay.
focus your attention on Google Plus as opposed to tweets. But then again, like you say, everyone's got to be measured.
Yes.
And what's specific to one business. And a simple answer to what the gentleman there said is that social media is for retail businesses. Wherever your customers are, that's where you should be. Follow the eyeballs, that's where the advertising is. And that's both online and offline. Mm-hmm.
No, I agree with those comments. Don't know that much about that specifically.
That's
yes, because it's not been key to us. but yes, I'm sure if it becomes something that's that significant, people will start to try and manipulate it in the same way.
Also, I would recommend to businesses how to use social media. Social media continually changes all the time. You never keep on top of it. There's the next new shiny object out the following week. What I would say is never underestimate the simple email address, because you mentioned that any business is about relationships. And there's a saying with the relationship, the money's in the list, but the money's in the list when you've got a relationship. So whatever social media platform you do, capture the email address.
Yeah, and I think Tracy's going to get me to wind up there, so thank you. I'm going to take your point to wind up, though. I think it's critical. It's not an either-or. I am not someone that's standing here saying, I never use email, I don't use the phone anymore. It's just a means of communication. So it's not either-or, it's one other way to talk. If it's relevant to your contacts, join the conversation there. Thank you.